I'm Dr. Cindy Woody, and I'm coming back today to bring you some fresh practice for the TExES 268 Principal as Instructional Leader exam. I know that I haven't made a video for you in a while, but I just really feel compelled to make one right now because I got a great email from an educator who's working to pass her 268 exam. She was very frustrated, and my heart just goes out to her and to so many others who are like her. I hear from people with this situation a lot. So her situation is she took the 268. I think she took it a couple of times. She didn't pass, but she doesn't know how to get better. And she's used up her practice examples and she just needs help. I wish I could take the time to coach everybody who needs help. My situation doesn't allow that. I'm a superintendent now. I was at the University of Texas at Arlington for 5 years, and I worked directly with the principal program, and I really enjoyed that work. But I continue to leave these videos up and to make videos, even though they're not the best videos, they're kind of raw and not edited. You'll see I have mistakes as I go along, but my goal really is just to give back to you and to help you give back to others. And I really want to help people like this lady who just needs to pass her test because she has opportunities waiting. She's been a proven educator in the classroom, she's been teacher of the year. She has opportunities to move into an assistant principal role, but she just needs to pass this test. So hopefully this will help. I know a good leverage point for you. Another reason this matters to me is the turnover rate in the TExES principalship is at an all-time high. Right now, we're looking at a 21% turnover rate. I'm making this video on New Year's Eve at the end of 2024, so we're about to enter 2025. And this is the most recent data from TEA. If I could pull the whole chart up, you could see 10 years worth. But our best year of low turnover rate in the most recent 10 years was the year that we didn't even have school during COVID 2020, 2021. We had a 14% turnover rate, almost 15% new principals. And now we're up to 21.5% of the people who are entering the principalship are first time principals or new. And the ones that are exiting, same rate, 21%, we're losing principals. So not only do I want to prepare you to pass this exam because we need more principals in TExES, but I also want to prepare you not to have turnover. I want you to be able to stay and I want you to enjoy the principalship and feel prepared. And honestly, this test is hard for a reason because being a principal is hard. And I think that if you can understand some of the underlying assumptions, you'll understand a lot about the direction that the Texas Education Agency is currently taking in the principalship and what they expect from principals to in the leadership roles of Texas. So let's go. Let's get this done. Okay, so the TExES 268, I've talked about this in some of the other videos. It really is heavily weighted for domains 1, 2, and 3: school culture, leading learning, and human capital. That doesn't mean that the other three dimensions are not important. Obviously, executive leadership, strategic operations, ethics, equity, and diversity, those are huge topics. But the good news is that those three domains are built into domains 1, 2, and 3. Maybe not as directly as they are in 4, 5, and 6, but indirectly, they're built into all the questions of 1, 2, and 3. So the focus, if you're looking at that middle column where it says percent of selected response items, the focus on the test is 1, 2, and 3: school culture, 12% of the selected response; leading learning, 17, well, not of the selected response, the whole test. It takes up 12%. The selected response questions that come from school culture account for 12% of your total score. The selected response questions from leading learning count as 17% of your score, and the selected response questions for human capital is 13% of your score. But then move over to those pesky constructed response questions. So many people struggle with the essays, and that's because they also are built on these. 10% of your total score comes from the school culture part of it, and you'll have a question. I believe that's question 4. I haven't looked at those lately. 25% comes from leading learning. That's your whole test. So that's 2 of your constructed responses and part of the other one. And then 5% is human capital on constructive response. So your total percent of your whole test, 42% of your whole test, is scored on the questions from leading learning. That's your biggest impact, and the biggest investment of your time should go there if you're studying, especially if you're trying to bring your score up. It's not that you can't bring your score up in those others, but there's so few questions asked and nothing from the executive leadership, strategic operations, or ethics and equity and diversity are on the constructive response questions. It's all about the other parts. So moving forward, I actually have some real well, yeah, these are real scores from someone who sent them to me. People will send me their 268 scores sometimes and ask for help. And so you can learn a lot by looking at your scores. So 60% of the exam is from the selected response. And in this case, this person did not have enough on the selected response to pass the exam. But this person also did not do well on constructed response. So as I talk to you about the selected response, I'm also going to be talking to you about the mindset of the constructed response, and then I'll come back with more videos on that. But in particular, look at domain 2, leading learning. So here she scored 7 out of 16 on leading learning, which is the low point of the test for her. 3 out of 5 on ethics, I will just say numbers. 3 out of 5 on domain 6, 4 out of 6 on domain 5, and 4 out of 6 on domain 4. So even if she nailed those, she's not going to bring her score up enough to account for the gaps above. So 7 out of 12 on domain 1, 7 out of 16 domain 2, and 7 out of 13 on domain 3. And usually when I see a score like this, I don't know, I wish I could move my head on the camera. Sorry about that. It's covering up her total score, which is 219 out of 300. So 219 points. And when you see a score like that, that typically tells me that this person doesn't understand the way the questions are being asked. So if you've had a score where you missed a question or two, it may be that you need to beef up on a certain area of content or certain type of question. But when you have a score like 219, that's a pretty good gap from passing, and she's staying consistently there. So to me, it tells me that she's struggling with the mindset of the test authors. So there's certain things you need to know, and I see this a lot with you experienced educators. Is you have enough real world learning not to fall for some of the textbook top questions, but they're there, and you have to know how to answer them. So the winner is domain 2. So if I were going to pick one area for you to really focus on, maybe even during this break, if you're just seeing this during Christmas break, New Year's, back to school, winter break, maybe you could focus on domain 2, leading learning. So as I talk about it, I'm going to kind of use interchangeably competency 3, I'm going to sometimes call part 1, and competency 4, I'm going to sometimes call part 2. You may have figured out the reason why is because it's hard to say competency 3 and competency 4. So part 1 and part 2 are comp 3 and comp 4. And this is only from domain 2. And when I talk about these things, when you wonder, what is domain 2? What is she even talking about? These are the principal preparation standards. They're in law. So in Texas, the legislature makes these, and they're in the Texas Education Code. So these are the laws that the law says these are the standards that a new principal has to have to show they're prepared. There's separate standards that are an existing, like a practicing principal has to have. Those are the Texas principal standards. These are the Texas principal preparation standards. So to become a principal, you have to demonstrate full understanding, which means you're going to have questions on all this stuff. Here we go. You can do this. Okay. So you see my graphics are a little off here. I apologize for that if it really bothers you. They look better to start with, but we do what we got to do to get this going. We moved from PowerPoint to Canva. Some issues I had there. So I call this part 1. I call this a house of collaboration. So it's two sides of the same house. So all the way through your questions, if you have to choose between two that seem like the right answer, you're going to choose the ones where you see some collaboration. And by collaboration, I mean the principal and the teachers working together in most cases. You'll see some where principals and other stakeholders work together. That's very important in domain 1 with school culture. But in domain 2, you're primarily focused on principal and teachers. So the first part of this house is the part about research. Research informs us, and we don't do knee-jerk decisions. So if you don't know what I mean by knee-jerk decisions, a knee-jerk decision is one where you just make it because something just came across your path that caused you to make this. So it's a conversation with a friend, or you walked in one classroom and saw that, and now you're going to do something for everybody. So none of that. We're going to use research. We're going to use best practices. We're going to be using feedback from our own school and from our campus. The other half of this is that great units and lessons yield great results. So this is confusing sometimes for people who are involved in a curriculum adoption or in a district that has a well-defined scope and sequence. It can be very confusing because in this test, it's assumed that the principal and the teachers can make adjustments to that. So you may be adding exit tickets, or you may be adjusting the pace, or it may be that in your real world, your district and your department and your whoever instructional coach tells you you're going to do exactly this. These are your slides. This is your lesson. These are your whatever. But in this test, you're going to kind of set that aside, and you're going to focus on the fact that the principal and the teachers are going to be making decisions based on what's happening in the classrooms. So I'm going to let you pause and look at this one. So when you see an asterisk on the standards, so in the TExES prep manual, we'll have that in just a minute. I'll send you a link to that. I'll share a link with you. The TExES 268 preparation manual. It has asterisks by some of the principal standards, and that's because these are the ones that are tested. So even though they're all important, it's just like when we take the STAR test. Some things are harder to test on a real test like this, like on a standardized test. So these are the ones that you will be responsible for. I'll let you pause if you want to read those. Okay, so moving on, these are the first two standards, or first two, standards under Domain 2, Competency 3. And what these two standards both mean is that leadership is collaborative and guided by best practices. So I like the image here. You can see the people working together, they're collaborating, they have several sources of information on the table. There's the idea, the light bulb in the middle. So they're using sound research based practices. And you'll see I've underlined some things: the development, implementation, coordination, evaluation of co curricular, curricular, and campus extracurricular programs to fulfill academic, developmental, social, and cultural needs. So you will expect to see questions where the principal's helping with the development of curriculum or programs, with the implementation of curriculum or programs, and the coordination and evaluation of those. And then the other part is the principal prioritizes instruction and student achievement by understanding, sharing, and promoting a clear definition of high quality instruction based on best practices from recent research. So let's look at some examples. Oh wait, yeah, here's some examples. Okay, so the principal invited teachers and parents and teachers to a meeting about proposed new math curriculum and focused on the why. So let's pretend for a minute this was one of your options to answer a question, and you're just evaluating whether this matches the standards and the mindset behind the standards or not. So the answer could be that the principal invited the teachers and the parents to a meeting about the proposed. So is it collaborative? I say yes because there's a meeting, and she's invited parents and teachers to the meeting. The word proposed is good here because proposed means that they're looking at it, but they haven't made a decision yet. The new math curriculum is focused on the why. So to me, the why tells me that the principal is going to be talking about the research behind it and gaining input from the parents and the teachers. I would hope that the principal talked to the teachers before the parents, but not always, sometimes all at once. But the stakeholders are here. They're having a meeting. They're talking about the curriculum, and they're focused on the why. So I would say yes. If you had to choose, this might be a good answer to a question. In a faculty meeting, the principal asked teachers to share ways that they had demonstrated this week's school-wide instructional focus. So is it collaborative? Yes. Is the faculty meeting focused on instruction? Yes. The school-wide instructional focus sounds to me like there's some planning going on and that they're working on best practices. So I say that's a good option if you want to just select an answer like this. The principal's newsletter spotlighted the school's shared definition of high quality instruction. I would say this is a good choice, and I'll show you. Let me flip back up for a second. In the second bullet, it says prioritizes instruction and student achievement by understanding, sharing, and promoting a clear definition of high quality instruction based on best practices from research. So that's what they're doing. The principal's sharing the school's definition of high quality instruction. And I would think it's a shared definition. So that means they've developed it together. The principal sent an email in July to let teachers know that admin had used last year's student data as the basis to discontinue the current math program. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but it actually happened to me as a teacher. So I came back one summer after having really worked to improve my understanding of the district's reading curriculum because I felt like I needed to improve there. And it was all new. And the admin had used the data to decide without any teacher input that we were going to move to a new reading program and reading curriculum. And they waited until back to school in service to tell us, which as you can imagine, made it a difficult launch. And it could have been a lot more successful if there had been more teacher input and buy-in and more conversation up front. So that would not be your best answer on this test. They're going to assume this wasn't collaborative. The good thing is it does use data, so that could be one saving point. But you would hope that there would be some input before this decision was made. The second one, or the last one, is the principal brought in a new school-wide behavior program that was popular at the state principals conference this summer. So you may be this principal someday that does this. You may go to TEPSA or TASP, and you may be getting all excited by networking with other principals and hearing all the great things that are happening in other schools, and they do presentations, and it's very engaging, and you come back all enthusiastic, and you decided there's going to be a new school-wide behavior program. This is not the right answer on this test. Because, right, this is the house of collaboration, two sides. One is the research side, and one is the part about great lessons and planning. So on this part, this one's missing the research. It says it's popular, but how do we know what that means? And it doesn't have any collaboration. So it's just the principal on their own. So that wouldn't be your best choice if you're doing a 268 test. Okay, so let's go a little deeper. When you look at these two objectives, which if you can't see from my head, I'll apologize. You may have to go back and look where they're set aside separately a few slides ago. So the principal facilitates the principal facilitates campus participation in collaborative district planning. So they are acknowledging that there's a district curriculum and there's district planning, implementation, monitoring, and revision of the curriculum. So we're not an island by ourselves in these questions. We're part of the big picture in the district. We're honoring the scope and sequence here, but we're also planning and implementing it in the school. So there's going to be some adjustments as we go. So the second one says implements a rigorous curriculum that's aligned with state standards, including college and career readiness standards. So you'll see a heavy emphasis on this one on domain 1 of TExES, which is all about planning. So we're looking for good planning so that when the teacher actually teaches the lesson, they know what they're dealing with. They have planned it based on student data. They planned it based on the scope and sequence, and they planned it based on sticking with the state standards, which are a really big one. So here's some examples. The principal used exit tickets and observation data to help a new teacher understand that the teacher was spending too much time on low-level concepts. I apologize, the bullets are a little off here. But if you think about it, that's a really good example. I like this as a possible answer to a question because it's all about the conversation with the teacher. Remember, your goal as the principal, as an instructional leader, is to help the teachers grow. Now, you may have to also grow, but the biggest impact of a great principal is how the great principal helps the whole staff to get better at what they do. So they're helping the teacher understand they're spending too much time on low-level concepts. And ding, 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 let me tell you, this is on the constructive response. You're going to see a teacher who is either spending too much time on lower-level concepts, which is a time issue, or they're focused on lower-level concepts and not the actual standards they're supposed to be teaching, which is an alignment issue. So if you'll see my other videos about the constructive response, you'll see that. And one of the questions is there's really a focus on knowing how to do this as a principal to help bring them around to what they need to be teaching in the time level, the amount of time and commitment, and knowing a high level from a low level concept. The next one the principal used extra emergent bilingual funds to purchase popular software to help students learn English online. So in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with using EB funds to buy software to practice their English. But you'll see that when you talk about alignment with the 268, this doesn't align with the mindset, because in this, the teachers aren't involved, so you're not seeing anything about collaboration. And the principal's just purchasing it because they have money and it's popular and it seems like a good idea. So this is what we call one of those knee-jerk decisions. So I would like to see the answer say something about they had looked at the research, they had met with emergent bilingual teachers, they had examined student data, and then they made the purchase. Okay, the next one, ask PLC groups to study and discuss data from a piloted curriculum. So I've actually been part of one of those situations where I was piloting the curriculum and my coworkers were not. And we met and studied the results and talked about the differences in theirs and mine and the student outcomes and about what the factors might be. And so, yes, that's a great example of how you get the two sides of the house, the collaboration, and the research-based practices. So that's a great opportunity there. Okay, look at this one. The principal facilitated a meeting with science teachers from the intermediate campus and the high school campus to address TEKS hotspots for incoming freshmen. I love this one. I've actually done this one before, and this one is one that's aligned with the test mindset because you're looking at a couple of things. You've got collaboration, right? You got the upper level and the lower level. You've got the focus on the planning and the being proactive. We know what our data said about our students. We're talking about next year's freshmen or the new freshmen this year and what they need. And we're also helping last year's teachers. So we've got the intermediate teachers, um, not just the teachers from the grade prior, but the intermediate campus. And with this situation, we don't know if intermediate means middle school. We don't know if it means fourth and fifth grade, but they're learning about what they could have done at their grade level to make sure that the incoming freshmen didn't have the hot spots that they have. So they'll address that in the upcoming instruction. I love that. That really fits with the mindset of Domain 2. Okay, asked each eighth grade English teacher to order novel sets that they felt were best for teaching main idea, a skill that many eighth graders missed on the STAR test. So in this one, do we have collaboration? Well, I mean, it might seem like it, but no, because it sounds to me like each teacher is ordering their own thing, right? Each eighth grade teacher is going to order novel sets they felt were best. And also, how do we know if those are best? Because they're just going on their gut. Is this maybe their favorite novel they read back when they were in school? Is it something that they've been wanting to buy for a long time because it fits with something else they wanted to do? Is it based really? Is it really well known for main idea? Are they using the whole novel? A lot of times now we're not using the whole novel because we're focusing more on the skills and the TEKS and the standards. So I'm not really comfortable with that answer. It doesn't really fit with the alignment, doesn't align with the 268 standards. Okay, so I'm gonna let you pause and look at this question. Hopefully you can see the question. They're having to actually order things. So on the selected response, you've got the drag and drop. So they're prioritizing the objectives and the steps that they would take. The principal's going to work with the teachers to help take steps to improve student understanding. So I want you to pause this. Also, this has the link. It's not a link, really. It's the long typed in address to get you to that TExES prep, the 268 prep manual if you haven't already been using that. Hopefully you have. But the quicker way would actually be to just Google the TExES 268 prep manual and look for the one that's published by the Texas Education Agency. This one is copyright 2020, and I like that it hasn't changed every single year. It's the last time it was updated was in 2020, which tells you you've got some continuity and some stability there. So as you study for the test you take is likely going to be very similar to the manual you studied. So pause and read the question. Okay, now pause and read the answers. I love the non-examples. I love how it explains on the in the handbook. It explains why certain answers are wrong or why certain answers are right. This one explains how they decided what to order in first, second, and third. So first they're looking at the planning. So they're looking at the TEKS. Second, they're breaking down the skill and the content in the TEKS, and you'll see that is really huge on the constructive response. So the principal helps the teacher do these things. And then they're going to display the TEKS on the board and discuss it with the students, the lesson objectives, so that when the principal walks by, the students understand what they're learning about. That's not the reason why, obviously, but in the examples, the principal should be able to tell by talking to teachers. And remember, in real world, we know the principal is always going to ask the student who is least likely to be able to understand based on their cognitive delays or whatever, but that's not what we're doing on this test. We're talking about that the students are going to understand if the teacher explained it correctly. And then last, state the objective and have students reflect on their mastery level. And so then they're going to actually be able to articulate it in their own words. And I do believe in this process. When I make these little comments aside, I understand it's frustrating as a teacher to go through all the process of being observed and having feedback. But in real life, it's powerful. It really is a powerful process. The better you get at it, the better your school is going to do. Okay, so this process actually mirrors the T-test rubric. If you're struggling with domain 2, take the time and you will thank yourself for doing this, take the time to get your T-test rubric out. You can Google again the T-test rubric and read what is proficient, and then go over and read what is needs improving and developing, because the questions of the ones that are struggling are always written from the needs improvement and developing language. And the principal is going to be aiming for the proficient language. You don't have to worry about anything above and beyond proficient, because that's the goal in TExES, to get all teachers to proficient. Obviously, as a teacher, we all want to be exceeds expectations, right? We want to be above and beyond. We want to be an expert. Also, this says, I don't know if my camera covers this up. We're helping teachers plan. So, helping teachers plan for standards alignment is a frequently measured skill and shows up in the constructed response items and selected, obviously. Okay, so here's another question. Take time to read this one. So, the principal is going to be asking the teacher some questions. Learning what questions to ask is an important thing that's going to show up on your constructed response. You have to write the questions you're going to ask. So, these are coaching questions. Okay, then here's the answer. Take time to read this. Pause. Okay, so this question also falls under planning dimension 1.1 in T-test. So read the planning dimension. You will see a lot of emphasis on planning with the correct standards, the appropriate amount of time, and with activities that support the verbs used in the TEKS in both the selective response and constructive response. The rationale is, if the lesson doesn't align with the standards and it isn't designed to maximize instructional time, it doesn't matter how wonderful the instruction might be. So those are the two things you're going to see the most that are broken. Is they're either spending too long on something, or they're not aligned with the standards. Okay, so remember, research informs us, no knee-jerk decisions, great units and lessons yield great results. Let me go back for just a second on planning. So when you're helping a teacher plan and you feel like they're spending too long on something, typically it's also the same problem as alignment with the TEK. So you can state it either way in your constructive response. So if there, let's just say the example of maybe students are supposed to be doing word problems and they're in fourth grade, but the teacher realizes they struggle with subtraction. And so the teacher's spending a whole day on reteaching how to do subtraction. Well, that's obviously too long. They're not supposed to be doing a whole lesson on subtraction, because the standard says they're working on word problems. And so maybe they're selecting the correct way to solve a word problem. So what you would do is you would help the teacher understand that if you spend 45 minutes reteaching subtraction, you haven't had the 45 minutes you were supposed to use to teach problem solving strategy or whatever the standard said. So maybe they're going to reteach subtraction in context of that, or maybe they're going to reteach subtraction in small groups or an individualized practice online. But there's a way that they can focus on practicing for subtraction in context of this TEK without slowing down the scope and sequence, the pacing of the students. Okay, well, there's the reminder. We did that. So now we're shifting to part 2 of domain 2, which is competency 4. And I like to say this one is the one where it's kind of like relationships. It's complicated. What's your relationship like? It's complicated. That's because competency 4 really is all about the human process of teaching and learning, but really teaching. And I apologize, my graphics have overlapped a little bit in some weird places. So let me take time to read this and tell you why I chose these photos. Each one of these pictures is carefully selected. And I apologize that my face is right on top of this other one. So if you look at the first one, at the thumb, this one is about monitoring and assessing classroom instruction. That's the principal monitoring and assessing what teachers are doing. So it's assumed then that the principal is going to visit, observe, and meet with teachers. So remember, I may have said earlier that the principal, in real life, we know the principal's so busy, and you're going to be so busy as a principal. But when we get all these things right, when we get the school culture right, and when we get the human capital part right, when we get leading learning right, then we have more time to visit, observe, and meet with teachers. It really does happen. So I think of it like medical rounds, and some of your districts may use Harvard rounds, but in medical rounds, the students in this situation would be the example of the teachers. So you have one lead doctor, and then you've got the interns going around with the lead doctor, and they're examining the patient's chart and what to do for that patient. And then they're going to move to the next room. So it's the same. The principal's going to each room But then they're not just using that feedback to help that one patient or that one teacher. They're going to meet with teachers and talk about the patterns that they see in the school. So the principal's improving the whole school. And in real life, the effect size of the principal is so powerful. One principal can move a school so fast and so far in 1 year when they do these things correctly. So the next one is an example of using the blueprint and making live adjustments. So this is like, considering this picture, the blueprint is the district's curriculum. So you have the adopted curriculum. We'll just say this is Bluebonnet Math or whatever your curriculum is. But in the process of using it, we see that we have to make some adjustments. I don't know how many of you have ever been on a build site for a bond project. I've been on lots of them in my roles. And you go in and maybe the foreman says, we were going to put the outlets here, but we realized we already had accounted for the plumbing lines, but we have this issue with the way the outlets are going to line up with the door frame. And so we need to move this a little bit. So there's all these tiny changes that are happening, and they happen all the time. The crews really do meet like this. They put on their protective gear and they gather around the blueprints and they problem solve. And so it's the same with teachers. You're the foreman of this group and you're working with the teachers to analyze the curriculum and to make adjustments based on what's happening in the classrooms. So the next one is the example of the chef and the restaurant manager. So maybe, I don't know, what do you call that guy in the back that's kind of mean on that show, and he talks mean to the cooks, and he's trying to make them do better. And so maybe it's a banquet, and the whole banquet is supposed to have ordered the same dishes, right? So it's like the teacher in the classroom, the teachers in the grade level or in the department. All the high school English 1 students are supposed to be studying the same curriculum or using the same curriculum. But the restaurant manager goes in and says, "Hey, at this feast, we happen to have some people who are diabetic. We have some people who are kidney patients. We have some who are working on lowering their blood pressure. So we need some that are low salt, and we need some that are maybe vegan, and we need some that are whatever." And so they're checking for these things because even though we're all being served the same meal, some people have to have adjustments made. And that's what the principal's doing with the teachers, is they're analyzing the data that they know about each student, and they're delivering up the curriculum with little adjustments made based on the data that they have about each student. I love the image of the golfer and the golf coach, even though I don't play golf. Wish I could play golf. I probably would be not so good at golf, but I would definitely need a golf coach if I played. And I love how the thought that maybe this golf coach is saying, if you just work on your leg placement in the middle of your swing, just the way that you angle your foot or your leg or your knee is going to change your stroke. And then because of that, your ball is going to get so much closer to, I don't know what we say, the green on the hole in the ground. But if you do it right, you're going to hit the mark, right? Your ball is going to land in the right place and you're going to get some big amazing thing that happens in golf. Put some golf words here. But it's the same with teachers. There's gaps in instruction for students. The principal's not working with the students. The principal is promoting instruction that reduces the gap for each student by analyzing the moves the teacher's making. And so by helping the teacher reflect on their own practice, then the teacher's going to make minor adjustments that are going to help students do better. And then the last one is a picture, it's an image of some people out at the sea and they're collecting ocean samples and they're looking at these little samples in a petri dish. I've actually been in a school, my prior district, we had an amazing marine science teacher who taught aquatic science to high school students, and they went out on real ocean going vessels in the Gulf of Mexico, and they studied water quality and along the shorelines and estuaries to check for pollution, the impact of pollution for the Environmental Protection Agency. And the students didn't sample the whole ocean. They sampled certain parts of the ocean looking for certain things. And they actually, excuse me, the EPA used their information, and people went back and made adjustments to improve the quality of water for the aquatic wildlife that they were studying. And so it's the same way for teachers. We're going to help the teachers, not just one teacher, we're going to help all teachers grow in using their assessments to inform their work. So maybe they're not taking samples at all. They're not doing the water quality test. Or maybe they're doing samples, but they're trying to sample the whole ocean and not just small samples. And maybe they're doing it too not frequently, not frequently enough, too infrequently. So they're not getting the big picture. They're just using star data or, whatever. But they're going to make adjustments based on data. So this one is going to be a little bit different from the first part of domain 2. This one's all about adjusting things. So I'm going to let you pause if you need to see the standards. Here they are. These are the ones that are tested for the second half of Domain 2. So you can see these and pause here. But I want to take a moment to talk about some secrets, right? So obviously, if you're watching this video, it's because you're looking for the secrets and you want to do well on your test. You don't want to just do well on your test. You want to be an amazing principal. But right now, I know you're super focused on this test. So, monitoring and assessing classroom practices is all about guiding the teacher to make improvements. So, here are some things that you could read up on. Think about the t-test process. It's just one big continuous pop cycle. So, when I say pop cycle, that POP stands for pre-conference, the observation, and the post-conference. So, whether you're doing the pre-conference, observation, and post-conference as walkthroughs, you're doing one classroom, you're doing the whole school, you're doing one department, one team. It all is data that improves the understanding of what's going on in your school. So you may be in the example, you may be helping the whole school with some type of cultural improvement. You may be helping one teacher who's struggling and in need of improvement. There's lots of ways the pop cycle can be used, but read your t-tests, go back and read not just your t-tests, but go to the website, Google t-tests, and understand what the evaluators are looking for, because this test is setting you up to be good at t-tests. If you're good at t-tests, you'll do good on this test. Another one is the effective schools framework. Unfortunately, the way life works is it's not that we take the most experienced principals and the ones who are best at turnaround and we drop them off in the schools that need the most help. Typically, the schools that need the most help are the ones where we see the most turnover. And a lot of times it's you, the brand new principal. I landed in one that was when I was brand new. I landed in a school that needed a lot of help, and I loved it. It was a great, wonderful opportunity. It was a great honor to be there. I don't know how prepared I was for it. So we want you to be more prepared than I was. My school wasn't in a turnaround situation. If it had been, I probably was. Honestly, we were using a different process then, but now we use the effective schools framework process, which is much better. It's all about getting better faster, not just the book getting better faster, but about getting the whole school better faster. And the mindset is it's not personal. And I think that's where all of us struggle with the t-test process is it just feels so personal. And another one is the teacher incentive allotment, TIA. If you're in a TIA school, you may know a little bit about this. You may love it, you may hate it, but the SLOs are golden. By that, I mean student learning objectives are golden. That's what really pushes the school forward is by identifying strong student learning objectives and then helping the teacher to focus on those and meet them. So you'll see a lot of that mindset built into this test. And then the last one, professional learning communities. If you are not familiar with those, Google them. The gurus of PLCs are Dufour and Eaker. So I don't know if you're working on your doctorate yet. Some of you may be still working on your master's, but if you ever work on your doctorate and some of your master's programs, you have to use the IRB process. If you conduct research, that's the Institutional Review Board. You can't conduct research in a university without having permission from the IRB committee, which helps make sure that when you conduct research, you do no harm. That's the primary responsibility. And then also that your design is good and all that. I hope you get your doctorate, by the way. Don't be slowed down by this. But when you're a PLC, you actually have permission to conduct action research without the IRB. So think about all the time, anytime it's talking about a teacher committee or a team or a PLC group or in your constructive responses and on your PASL also, you have to have PLC stuff, that the focus is on learning as a group and being treated as a professional. It's professional learning. So we're out in the field now. We've already launched as teachers, we've already launched as principals, and now we're working together to solve the real problems in our school, not textbook problems. We're actually doing action research, and every time we meet, we're going to talk about what we learned last time and how we all can learn from that and move forward and make changes this time. So it's about continuous adjustments. So the first point under part 2 is about monitoring instruction routinely. So like I said, we're assuming the principal has plenty of time and they visit classrooms, they go to grade level and department and team meetings, and they provide evidence-based feedback to improve instruction. And so that's where the action moves into impact. The next part, I'm sorry for how the alignment is on here. Make adjustments. The principal is going to make adjustments to accelerate and intervene. But we need to remember with teachers, we don't go backwards. The impact is on pacing and alignment to get to the heart of the matter. So you will see sometimes that teachers are rushing in the videos that they give or in the written examples they give. They're rushing some of the hard things and they're spending too long on some of the easy things. Or they're going backwards, they're spiraling down several grade levels, and they're spending too much time reteaching things from the past that students didn't master instead of finding ways to accelerate and intervene so that we don't have to go backwards. So you'll see that is an expectation of the principal in this test. Purposeful data, lots of data, more than just whole class data. The principal coaches the teacher who then impacts the students. And so you can see in the little graphics here that we're examining the data with a microscope, but we're also looking at this is the teacher climbing, right? Not just the student. The teacher's climbing and the teacher has more to climb. And then there's the gap for the student and the teacher's the one that builds the bridge. And then the last one, you see the clock, the people talking, and the data going up for the people. So the principle is all about building capacity. Because of the principle, the teachers get better at this stuff. It's always about helping teachers and the school get better. So it's about supporting the staff, developing capacity, helping them collaboratively and individually use classroom formative and summative assessment data to inform instructional practices and interventions. Okay, so here's some examples. In a post conference, the principal told the teacher that they spent too long on the closure portion of the lesson. So the problem I have with this one is the principal told the teacher. So I don't see any discussion. I don't see a coaching question. So instead of told the teacher, the principal maybe ask a coaching question about, I noticed that you spent 15 minutes on the closure. You know, how did you decide that was a good use of your time? Or what could you do to tighten that time up that would improve instruction time on task or something like that? So just coaching question. After a walkthrough, the principal helps a new teacher think through how to use exit tickets instead of whole class responses to monitor understanding. So you think that would be a good answer to a test question if that was appropriate? Yes, because I see the collaboration. I see them using lots of kinds of data. I see them helping the teacher improve their craft and thinking, helping the teacher to think. So the principal asked the PTO to provide input on this month's student progress monitoring data. So you might think that's a great one. If we were working on domain one, we were talking about parent teacher organizations and stakeholders and school culture, this might be a little bit better fit. But in reality, we don't collect student monthly or weekly progress monitoring data for outside audiences. They're used for teachers to inform instruction. So it's not for the central office. It's not for the PTO. The PTO will be involved in campus improvement planning, and there will be lots of data for that. But these small individual student progress monitor data points are not for the public. They're not really like that. They could be used in a parent conference from the teacher, but the principal's not going to take that out to the PTO. Okay, the principal agreed with teacher in a post conference that this particular class just has many challenging students who will struggle to make progress due to individual challenges and weaknesses. Nope. And you'll see one in a minute that shows an example why. We're not going to let the teacher dwell on the challenges that they have with the individual students. Remember, in this test, we're not blaming the students. We're not blaming disabilities. We're not blaming gaps. We're not blaming last year's teacher. We're not blaming parenting. It's not about blame. It's about accepting the data that we have right now and knowing how to make a plan to reach each student and make an impact. So then that's for TExES 268. That's the whole heart of it. The next one, or last one, told teachers that the reason for this interim assessment is to gather data for the district administration to use for grant reporting purposes. Well, we do have to have data for grants. We have to have data at the district level for lots of things. But the primary purpose for gathering data is never for the outside audience. It's the same as PTO. Yes, central office absolutely does have the right to be involved and should be involved in the data gathering process and setting clear benchmarks and interims and those kinds of things so we can see how instruction is moving along at each campus. But that's not the primary purpose for gathering student data. Okay, so here's a couple of questions. I'm going to give you a chance to pause the video, read this question. Okay. And I think the part that got cut off says on number 22, described in key policy, key point number 2 of the principal facilitation notes. And you can see above there's key point number 2. Again, this came from the TExES Prep 268 manual. And here's the answer. Be sure and read the wrong answers. Pause. And then a really helpful place to look for more information on this is the turnaround information on the Texas Effective Schools Framework. Just read it. If you've never read it before, you'll enjoy reading it. I enjoy reading it. Maybe that's because I'm kind of a nerd. Here is just one little pullout from that. This just shows the common vision and why a turnaround campus, what they use assessment for. Campuses should assess current campus practices to the aspiration language, which means the goal language of the essential actions in the effective schools framework. So you're trying to match what your campus is doing and gathering assessment and using assessment data to what's going on in the lessons in the framework. This practice will act as a needs assessment to determine strengths and areas of growth to ensure campuses and districts are appropriately prioritizing the highest leverage actions for continuous improvement efforts. The ESF diagnostic serves as a clear tool to clearly identify, effective tool, to clearly identify strengths and areas of growth through the lens of an unbiased ESF facilitator. So that's just kind of shows you the big picture of turning the school around. And then here's the turnaround principles notes. So you could expect to see something like this either in your constructive response or your selective response or both. So read the key points. Okay. And then here's the data chart they're going to be talking about in the table. All of these are straight from the handbook. And then here's the question. So pause. And then study the correct answers and the incorrect answers. And again, a great place to look is the Effective Schools Framework. They have 5 levers or levers. Lever number 5 is all about effective instruction, which is the heart of the framework on the SF. You'll see it's in the center. And I thought these points about data-driven instruction and intervention were really good. So if you don't have time to read the whole thing, pause and read these. And one more question from competency 4. And here's the answer. And again, this one is talking about having low expectations for your class. It says option A is incorrect because even though it's encouraging, it offers no support to guide or guidance in addressing the problem. Remember, the principal's focusing on addressing the problem, not just commiserating. Option B is incorrect because it puts the responsibility of addressing the problem on students instead of acknowledging Mrs. O'Toole's role. Option D is incorrect because it advances tacit, which means like unstated, acceptance of the problem, and it absolves Mrs. O'Toole from any role in addressing it. So instead of saying the teacher is going to use this information to help the class address their needs or individual students address needs, then we're just saying, well, you can't really help it. This is just that low class. You know how the freshman class is this year. Okay, so again, back to the image, the second part is all about the helping hand. The principal is the helping hand who's ever present and able to give the teachers a hand up to get better. So let me just say in summation, you can do this. I know it feels discouraging, but you absolutely can do this. Hundreds and hundreds of people have passed this test. You're just as smart as they are. You can do this, and it may feel like they know more. Sometimes knowing more makes it harder, right? They don't know more. You can prepare for this test. You can focus on the standards, and you can learn to do this test. Just focus on the mindset of the test test designers and the standards. Also, some people ask me from time to time if I coach people. I don't. I may have said earlier, I don't know. I've had to record this a couple of times. I may have said that I'm a superintendent now. I don't have time for that. Maybe at some point in my life I will. But I do continue to try to make these videos and I keep them up on YouTube, even though they're not the best videos. They're free. And people ask me if they can help me in some way. You can help me by liking and subscribing and commenting positive comments on them. The only reason I ask that is because that makes it pop up more when people search for help. It makes it pop up on YouTube or on Google as a possible source for them to be helped. And I do hope these are helpful. If you want to reach out to me, that's fine. I do the best I can to respond and to help people. Sometimes I call people and sometimes I email people and sometimes I make a video, but if I don't get to you right away, it's not personal. Being a superintendent is pretty time consuming. Like I say, at some point maybe I can help more, or maybe after I retire, I could do this. It's some of my things I do in retirement. But for now, don't give up. Texas needs you. I look forward to congratulating you on being the next certified principal in this great state of Texas.